High Commander Serana stood at the center of the Galactic Coalition Assembly Hall and watched the newest species enter through the great bronze doors. The humans had finally arrived. She had heard stories about them for the past decade, ever since their primitive ships had stumbled into Coalition space and made first contact with the Rasheen traders near the Outer Rim. Now she would see them for herself. And she was not impressed. There were 5 of them walking in a neat line across the polished floor, their soft shoes making quiet sounds against the ancient stone. Serana towered over most species in the galaxy, standing 8 feet tall with 4 powerful arms and natural armor that covered her body like plates of dark iron. Her people, the Valkyrie, had conquered 12 star systems through strength and discipline. They feared nothing because nothing in the known galaxy could match them in combat. But these humans were something else entirely. They were small, barely reaching her chest, even when they stood straight. Their skin looked soft and fragile, like the belly of a newborn cave slug. They had no claws, no fangs, no venom glands, no natural weapons of any kind. She could see the blue lines of blood vessels running beneath their pale flesh. One good strike from a Valkyrie warrior would break them in half. The lead human was a male with gray hair at his temples and lines on his face that suggested age. He wore simple dark uniform with a small emblem on his chest, and he carried no visible weapons. His name, according to the briefing documents, was Ambassador Marcus Cole. He walked with a calm confidence that Serana found almost amusing. Did this creature not understand where he was standing? Did he not realize that half the species in this room could kill him with a casual gesture? Assembly Hall held representatives from 37 spacefaring civilizations. The Rasheen with their tentacles and bioluminescent skin sat in the water tanks along the eastern wall. The current, massive silicon-based beings who moved like living mountains occupied the reinforced platforms near the back. The Sari delegation floated in their anti-gravity spheres, their gaseous bodies swirling with colors that indicated their emotional states. And in the center, on the raised platform reserved for the most powerful members of the coalition, sat the Valkyrie delegation with Serana at its head. She leaned forward in her seat as Marcus Cole approached the speaking circle. Honored representatives of the Galactic Coalition, the human began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems embedded in every seat. I come before you today with a proposal that I believe will benefit all our peoples. Serana noticed that his hands were steady and his eyes moved across the room without fear. Perhaps he was too stupid to be afraid. Humanity seeks to establish a mutual defense treaty with the coalition. Marcus continued, we propose that any attack on one member species be considered an attack on all, and that we share our military resources and intelligence to face common threats together. A ripple of murmurs passed through the assembly. Serana let out a sound that her translator rendered as a scornful laugh. The Dazari turned their spheres to face her, their bodies flashing with curious yellows. You wish to speak, High Commander? The assembly moderator asked. I do, Serana said. Rising from her seat, she walked down to the speaking circle, her armored feet striking the stone with heavy thuds that echoed through the hall. She stopped directly in front of Marcus Cole and looked down at him. The top of his head barely reached her lower chest. A mutual defense treaty, she repeated, letting the words drip with contempt. You want the great powers of this coalition to pledge their warships and their warriors to protect humanity. That is correct, Marcus said, meeting her gaze without flinching. And in return, humanity would pledge the same to protect all coalition members. Serana heard laughter from several delegations. The Corinth rumbled with what passed for amusement among their kind. Even the normally diplomatic Rasheen were flashing colors of mockery. Tell me, Ambassador Cole, Serana said, circling him slowly like a predator examining prey. What exactly would humanity contribute to such an alliance? Our ships, our soldiers, our technology, our resources. Your ships are slow and poorly armed, Sirana countered. Your soldiers are fragile and require constant rest. I am told that humans must sleep for a third of every day just to function. Is this true? Humans typically need 6 to 8 hours of sleep. Yes, more laughter from the assembly and your bodies, Sirana continued, reaching out with one of her 4 hands to tap a claw against Marcus's shoulder. No armor, no natural weapons. You cannot even see in darkness without artificial assistance. You are, forgive my bluntness, prey animals. She expected anger, she expected fear, she expected the human to back down, to stammer excuses, to retreat from the speaking circle in shame. Instead, Marcus Cole simply smiled. It was a small expression, barely a curve of his lips. But something in it made Sirana pause. High Commander, he said, his voice still calm. I understand your skepticism. From a purely physical standpoint, humans must seem quite unimpressive. That is an understatement. But I would ask you to consider this, Marcus continued. Every species in this room evolved to survive in their environment. The Valkyrie developed armor and strength to dominate your predator-rich homeworld. The Rasheen developed flexibility and regeneration to survive in their crushing ocean depths. The Corinth developed size and density to withstand the volcanic hellscape where they were born. And what did humans develop? Sirana asked mockingly. The ability to die easily. We developed the ability to not give up. The words hung in the air. Sirana frowned, uncertain how to respond. Our ancestors crossed deserts that killed everything else, Marcus said. They sailed across oceans in boats made of wood and cloth. They climbed mountains that had no air to breathe. They went to our moon in ships held together with bolts and prayers, and when those ships failed, they found ways to bring our people home anyway. Pretty words, Sirana said dismissively. But words do not win wars. No, Marcus agreed. But neither does strength alone. The galaxy is vast, High Commander, and there are things out there that even the Valkyrie cannot defeat through force. When that day comes, you may find that having allies who refuse to quit is more valuable than having allies with the biggest claws. Sirana stared at him for a long moment, then turned to address the assembly. I move that we reject the human proposal, she declared. The Valkyrie have no interest in pledging our forces to protect a species that cannot protect itself. The vote was swift and decisive. 29 species voted against the treaty. Only the Rasheen and a few minor delegations voted in favor. Humanity's proposal was rejected as the assembly began to disperse. Marcus Cole caught Sirana's eye one final time. You may change your mind, Commander, he said quietly. We have a way of surprising people. Sirana dismissed him with a wave of her upper right hand and walked away. She forgot about the humans before she even reached the doors. 3 months later, the Hollow arrived and the galaxy began to burn. The first warning came from a mining colony on the edge of Valkyrie space. A distress signal, broken and filled with static, spoke of ships that came from nowhere and weapons that cut through armor like water through sand. Then the signal went dead. Sirana dispatched a patrol fleet to investigate. 12 warships crewed by her finest warriors. None of them returned. The second warning came 3 days later when long-range sensors detected a massive energy signature moving through the outer territories. By the time Sirana's analysts identified what they were seeing, 2 more colonies had gone silent. The enemy had no name in any coalition database. They were machines, ancient and terrible, moving in perfect coordination like the limbs of a single vast organism. Their ships were black as the void between stars, and their weapons fired beams of concentrated antimatter that could punch through Valkyrie battle armor like a needle through cloth. The Coalition scientists who survived their first encounters called them the Hollow, because their ships seemed to exist only to consume. They did not conquer. They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They simply arrived, stripped the world of all useful resources including its population, and moved on to the next target within 2 weeks. The Valkyrie had lost contact with 7 colonies and 4 military outposts within 4 weeks. They had lost their entire outer defensive line. Serana stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Wrath of Kethra, and watched the tactical display paint her empire in spreading red. High Commander, her communications officer called out, "We are receiving a transmission from the Third Fleet. Put it through." The main view screen flickered to life, and Serana saw her brother's face. Admiral Kethran commanded the Third Fleet, the pride of the Valkyrie Navy, and he was the finest warrior she had ever known. But the face she saw now was not the face of a proud warrior. It was the face of someone who had seen death coming and knew he could not stop it. "Serana," Kethran said, his voice cutting through bursts of interference. "They are too many. Our weapons barely scratch their hulls. And for every ship we destroy, 10 more appear. Fall back to the Brenner system," Serana ordered. "Regroup with the Home Guard, and we will make our stand there." "There is no time," her brother replied. "They have already surrounded us. I am sending you all the tactical data we have gathered. Use it. Find their weakness. Avenge us." "Catherine, no. You must retreat." "That is an order." Her brother smiled, and she saw the same fearless pride that had marked their family for 1,000 generations. "I am sorry, sister. It seems I will not be there to see you crowned Empress after all. Fight well, die well. Remember me." The view screen showed hollow ships closing in from all sides, black shapes against the burning stars. She watched the Third Fleet fight with desperate courage, watched her brother's flagship charge directly at the largest enemy vessel in a final act of defiance. Then the screen went white, and when the light faded, the Third Fleet was gone. Serana did not weep. Valkyrie commanders did not weep. But she stood in silence for a long time, her 4 hands clenched into fists, her heart pounding with a grief that had no outlet. "Open a channel to the Coalition," she finally commanded. "Priority 1, send to all member species." The next hours were the most humiliating of her life. She contacted the Rasheen, who had always been friendly to the Valkyrie. They expressed sympathy and regret, but their fleets were needed to protect their own borders. She contacted the Corinth, the oldest and most powerful civilization in the Coalition. They were still debating the appropriate response and could make no promises. She contacted species after species, calling in favors and making desperate offers. Every answer was the same: "We are sorry, we cannot help. We must protect our own people first." By the 6th week, the Hollow had reached the inner territories. Valkyrie refugees fled in overcrowded transports, and half of those transports were destroyed before they could escape. Serana's remaining fleet was reduced to 43 ships, and more were lost every day. She stood alone on her bridge, staring at the tactical display that showed her homeworld surrounded by enemy signatures. When her communications officer spoke again, "High Commander, we are receiving an incoming transmission." "From who?" "The human government. They are responding to our distress call." Serana closed her eyes. She had almost forgotten about the humans when she had sent the general distress signal. It had gone to every Coalition species, including the ones she considered too weak to matter. She had expected nothing from them. "Put it through," she said wearily. The face that appeared on her screen was familiar Ambassador Marcus Cole, the same human she had dismissed and mocked in the assembly hall. "High Commander Serana," he said. "We received your message. Help is on the way." "Help?" Serana repeated flatly. "From humanity. We have dispatched everything we can spare. Our main fleet will arrive in approximately 3 weeks. but we have sent an advance ship to provide immediate assistance. One ship? It was the fastest vessel we had available. Serana wanted to laugh, but she was too tired. Ambassador, I appreciate the gesture, but one human ship will make no difference against the Hollow. My entire navy has failed to stop them. What do you think one small vessel will accomplish? I honestly do not know, Marcus admitted, but we could not do nothing. We could not watch your people die and simply wait for the comfortable option. Before Serana could respond, her tactical officer interrupted. High Commander, a human vessel has just exited hyperspace at the edge of the system. It is hailing us. Put it on screen. The image shifted to show a small human frigate hanging in space. It was perhaps a fifth the size of a standard Valkyrie cruiser, and its hull showed signs of hasty repairs and heavy use. The face of the ship's captain appeared beside the image. It was Marcus Cole, Ambassador. Serana said with surprise, "You are on that ship yourself." "I thought it was only right," Marcus replied simply. "I asked you to trust us." "I should be willing to back that up in person. Now, High Commander, where do you need us?" Serana stared at him for a long moment. This small, fragile creature had crossed the galaxy in a barely armed ship to stand beside a species that had treated him with contempt. She did not understand it, but she found, to her surprise, that she was grateful. "We are holding position near the fourth planet," she said. "The Hollow main force is regrouping for their final assault. We have perhaps 6 hours before they attack. Then we have 6 hours to figure out how to survive." Marcus said, "Send us your tactical data. Let us see what we can do." Serana was about to respond when alarms began screaming across her bridge. "High Commander," her tactical officer shouted. "Hollow signatures emerging from hyperspace, multiple contacts. They are attacking now, on the view screen." Serana watched black shapes pour into the system like a swarm of hungry insects. The Hollow had found them, and the final battle for her people had begun. The battle lasted less than an hour. Serana had known they were outmatched, but she had not understood by how much, until she watched her remaining fleet torn apart by the Hollow swarm Valkyrie warships that had conquered a dozen worlds were reduced to floating debris in minutes. Plasma cannons that could crack planetary shields barely scratched the black hulls of the enemy vessels. Her warriors fought with all the fury and skill that had made them feared across the galaxy, and it made no difference at all. The Hollow simply absorbed the damage and kept coming by the time the shooting stopped. Serana's fleet of 43 ships had been reduced to 7. Her flagship, the Wrath of Kethra, drifted in the void with dead engines and failing life support. Fires burned in the lower decks, and half her crew was dead or dying on the bridge. Emergency lights cast everything in a dim red glow. "Damage report," Serana commanded. Though she already knew the answer would be bad. "Engines offline," her engineering officer reported. "Primary weapons destroyed. Secondary weapons at 15%. Life support will fail in approximately 4 hours. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Can we restore engine power? Perhaps. But we need at least 30 minutes of uninterrupted repair time." Serana looked at the tactical display. A massive Hollow carrier was moving slowly toward her position, surrounded by dozens of smaller escort vessels. Its intent was clear. The Hollow did not waste resources. When they encountered disabled ships, they did not destroy them outright. They boarded them, harvested the crew for raw materials, and recycled the hull for useful components. 10,000 Valkyrie souls served on the VI's. Wrath of Kethra. All of them were about to die, and there was nothing Serana could do to stop it. She was preparing to order her crew to arm themselves for a final stand when a small blip appeared on her tactical display. The human frigate, somehow still intact, was moving. "What are they doing?" her tactical officer. Muttered Serana watched in confusion as the tiny vessel accelerated. Away from the relative safety of the debris field. It was heading directly toward the Podvorta. Hollow carrier, open a channel to the human ship. She ordered. Marcus Cole's face appeared on her screen behind him. She could see smoke and flickering consoles. His uniform was torn and there was blood on his forehead. But his eyes were calm. Ambassador, what are you doing? That carrier will destroy you in seconds. Probably, Marcus agreed. But it will take them time to do it. Time you can use to get your engines back online. Serana stared at him. You are positioning yourself between my ship and the Hollow. That is the plan. Yes, you will die. We all die eventually, High Commander. The only question is whether our death means something. The human frigate completed its maneuver and came to a stop directly in the path of the advancing hollow carrier. It was like watching a small animal stand before a charging mountain. The size difference was almost obscene. Ambassador, I do not understand, Serana said. My people mocked you. We dismissed your offer of alliance. We called you weak and treated you with contempt. Why would you sacrifice yourself for us? Marcus was silent for a moment through the view screen. Serana could see the hollow carrier beginning to target the human ship. Weapons ports opened along its hull like hungry mouths. When I was young, Marcus said finally, my grandfather told me a story about a great fire that swept through our city. People were trapped in a building, and there was no way for rescue teams to reach them in time. A man none of them knew ran into the burning building and held a door open so they could escape. He died when the ceiling collapsed, but everyone else survived. Someone asked my grandfather why the man did it, why he would die for strangers. My grandfather said that sometimes being human means standing in front of fire so others do not have to burn. The first hollow weapons fired. Beams of antimatter streaked across space toward the human frigate. Marcus did not flinch. Get your people out. Commander, he said, that is all I ask. Make our sacrifice worth something. The human ship lurched as the first beam struck its hull armor plating vaporized. An atmosphere vented into space, but the ship did not explode. It began to move, weaving through the incoming fire with desperate agility. They are trying to draw the Hollow's attention. Serana's tactical officer reported with disbelief. They are succeeding. The carrier is changing course to pursue them. Serana watched the human frigate dance through a storm of death that should have destroyed it a dozen times over. She saw pieces of the hull torn away by near misses. She saw sections of the ship simply cease to exist when beams found their mark, and still the humans fought. Still they flew. Still they refused to die. How are they still alive? Someone on the bridge whispered Serana did not know by every law of physics and probability. The human ship should have been destroyed in the first 10 seconds. But there it was. Burning and broken and somehow still fighting. Buying seconds with blood and minutes with courage. Engineering, Serana called out. How long until we have engine power? We need more time. Commander, you have whatever time they can give us. Work faster. On the view screen. She watched the human frigate take another devastating hit. Half the ship was gone now. Exposed decks venting fire and bodies into the void. But it kept moving. Kept firing its pitiful weapons at enemies it could not possibly defeat. Ambassador Cole. Serana opened the channel again. Marcus, can you hear me? The response came through heavy static. Still here. Commander, mostly. You have bought us enough time. Break off. Save yourself. Cannot do that, Marcus replied. His voice strained. If we run, they will turn their attention back to you. You need a few more minutes. You do not have a few more minutes. Then we will have to make do with what we have. Another hit. The human ship was barely recognizable now. Just a twisted core surrounded by debris that had once been a functioning vessel. and still it would not stop. Why? Sirana demanded, the question tearing out of her with an emotion she did not recognize. Why do you keep fighting? Why will you not run? You owe us nothing. Through the static and the fire and the sound of his ship dying around him, Marcus Cole answered, because someone has to stand. Commander, because you needed help, because that is what humans do. We are not the strongest or the fastest or the hardest to kill. But we do not quit, we do not abandon people who need us. Even when they do not want our help. Even when they think they do not need it. We stand anyway. The holocarrier fired its main weapon. A beam of pure destruction crossed the void and struck the human frigate dead center. For a moment, the ship was outlined in blinding light. Then it was gone. Marcus Cole was dead. 10,000 humans had died with him, all volunteers. All knowing they were flying into certain death for a species that had treated them with contempt. Sirana stood in silence on her ruined bridge around her. She heard her crew working frantically at their stations, and then, finally, her engineering officer spoke, engine power restored. Commander, we can move. Sirana forced herself to focus, all ships. Emergency acceleration. Get us out of the system now. As the wrath of Kethra limped toward the edge of the system, Sirana kept her eyes on the tactical display. She saw the Hollow beginning to pursue. She saw that they would never make it to safety in time, and then she saw something else. New signatures were appearing at the edge of the system, hundreds of them. Commander, her tactical officer said with shock in his voice. Human ships, an entire fleet of them. They are here. Sirana watched the human fleet pour into the system like a tide of righteous anger. They were here. They had come, and they had brought enough ships to fight. Marcus Cole was dead. But his people had arrived, and suddenly, for the first time in weeks, Sirana felt something she had almost forgotten. She felt hope. The human fleet hit the Hollow like a hammer striking glass. 300 warships poured weapons fire into the enemy formation with a fury that Sirana had never seen from any species. They did not fight like Volcari. With disciplined formations and careful tactical maneuvers, they fought like something desperate and angry. Something that had already decided it was willing to die and had nothing left to lose. The Hollow, for the first time since their arrival in the galaxy, seemed confused. Their perfect coordination faltered as human ships broke every rule of conventional warfare. Small frigates rammed larger enemy vessels, their crews ejecting at the last moment or sometimes not ejecting at all. Carriers launched wave after wave of fighters that swarmed Hollow ships like angry insects, and everywhere, always, the humans pressed forward, accepting losses that would have broken any other fleet. They are insane. Sirana's tactical officer whispered. Sirana did not respond. She was watching a human cruiser take a direct hit from a hollow weapon that should have destroyed it completely. The ship lost half its hull, venting atmosphere and bodies into space. But instead of retreating, it continued its attack run, firing every weapon it had left into the enemy vessel until both ships exploded together. No, Sirana said quietly. They are not insane. They are something else. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it was over, the Hollow fleet had been forced to retreat for the first time in recorded history. The human fleet had lost nearly half its ships, but they had won in the aftermath. Sirana transferred to a human medical vessel to receive treatment for her injuries. The Valkyrie did not normally accept help from other species, but her own medical facilities had been destroyed, and the humans had offered. Without being asked, she walked through the corridors of the human ship and saw things that confused her. Human crew members laughed with each other despite their wounds and their exhaustion. They shared food and told stories about fallen comrades with smiles on their faces. They treated their dead with reverence, but not despair, speaking of them as if they had simply gone somewhere else and would be waiting. When the living arrived, It was not the behavior of a species facing extinction. It was the behavior of a species that had made peace with death and decided to enjoy life anyway. She found the human admiral in the ship's mess hall, sitting alone with a cup of something hot and bitter-smelling. Admiral Sarah Chun was a small woman with gray in her hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of decades of command. She looked up as Sarana approached and gestured to the empty seat across from her high commander. "Please, join me." Sarana lowered herself carefully into the human-sized chair, her armored body barely fitting. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble. "And I owe your people more than I can ever repay." Admiral Chun shook her head. Ambassador Cole made his own choice. So did everyone who flew with him. That is what humans do. We choose to help, even when it costs us everything. Why? The question had been burning in Sarana since she watched Marcus Cole die. She needed to understand Admiral Chun considered the question for a long moment. "Do you know how humans evolved, High Commander? I know you are from a relatively mild planet. Your environment did not produce natural weapons or armor. That is true. We are soft. We are slow. We are weak compared to most species in this galaxy. But we survived because we developed something else." "What?" "Stubbornness. We call it persistence. Our ancestors were not the strongest hunters on our world. They could not outrun their prey or overpower it with brute force, so they simply followed it. They walked after it hour after hour, day after day, until it collapsed from exhaustion and they could finish it. We evolved to simply not stop." Sarana frowned. "That is not a combat strategy. No. It is a survival strategy, and it shaped everything about us. Our bodies are designed to keep going long after they should have failed. Our minds are designed to find hope in situations where hope makes no sense. We crossed deserts that killed everything else because we simply refused to accept that we could not. We sailed across oceans in ships that should have sunk. We went to our moon in vessels held together with primitive metals and prayer." Admiral Chun leaned forward. "There is a concept in our language that does not translate well. We call it spite. It means doing something not because you can win, but because something wants you to fail, and you refuse to give it the satisfaction. You fight out of spite, sometimes. When everything else fails, when hope is gone and victory is impossible, humans can still fight out of sheer stubborn refusal to quit. We do not like being told that something cannot be done, so we do it anyway." Sarana thought about Marcus Cole, standing his tiny ship against a carrier that could have destroyed a fleet. She thought about the human cruiser that had continued fighting with half its hold on. She thought about all the humans who had died today, not because they believed they could win, but because they believed that standing up mattered even if they fell. "I called your people prey animals," Sarana said. "I was wrong. You were not entirely wrong," Admiral Chun replied with a small smile. "We are fragile. We do die easily, but we are also very hard to keep dead. Kill one human who believes in something, and 10 more will rise to take their place. Kill those 10, and 100 will come. We do not have the strength to fight your battles for you, High Commander, but we can remind you how to fight them for yourselves." Over the following weeks, Sarana learned just how true those words were. The human fleet did not simply fight the Hollow alone, they taught other species how to fight them. Human tacticians studied every engagement and shared what they learned. With anyone who would listen, human engineers examined, captured Hollow technology, and developed countermeasures that they gave away freely. Human diplomats traveled to every coalition world and delivered the same message: we can win this, but only if we stand together. And slowly, impossibly, the coalition began to respond. The Narration, inspired by human courage, sent their own fleet to join the fight. The Dasari, who had never engaged in warfare, developed new weapons based on their unique gaseous biology. Even the ancient Karns, who had not fought a war in 10,000 years, began to mobilize. Species that had refused to help the Valkyrie alone now rushed to join an alliance led by creatures they had dismissed as weak. When Sirana asked Admiral Chun why, the humans smiled. Because we showed them that it was possible. Fear is contagious, High Commander, but so is courage. Humans are not strong enough to win this war alone. But we are stubborn enough to make everyone else believe that winning is possible. And belief is a weapon more powerful than any cannon. 3 months after the Battle of Kethra, the United Defense Force was officially formed. Representatives from every coalition species signed the charter in the same assembly hall where Marcus Cole had been rejected. Sirana was appointed Supreme Commander, with Admiral Chun as her second. Together, they began preparing for the real war because the Hollow were not defeated. They had retreated to the edge of the galaxy, to a place where ancient gates connected normal space to the void between galaxies, and through those gates, more Hollow were coming. The swarm that had nearly destroyed the Valkyrie was just the beginning. The true invasion had not yet begun, but this time, when it came, the galaxy would be ready. This time, they would stand together, and they would not stop until the Hollow learned what humans had taught them all, that some prey refuses to be hunted, and some fires cannot be extinguished no matter how hard you try to stamp them out. 6 months after the formation of the United Defense Force, the combined fleet of every coalition species gathered at the Rim Gate. It was the largest armada ever assembled in galactic history. Ships from 37 different civilizations hung in the void, their hulls painted with the symbol of the Alliance, a single hand, fingers spread, reaching upward toward the stars. Sirana stood on the bridge of the new flagship, the Unity, and surveyed her forces. Valkyrie battlecruisers flew in formation with human carriers and Rasheen assault vessels. The Zari gas ships drifted alongside Karn's stone dreadnoughts. Species that had been enemies for centuries now fought side by side, united by a common threat and a common lesson. Beside her stood Commander Elena Cole, daughter of Marcus Cole, who had volunteered for this mission. The day she learned how her father had died, Elena was young, barely 30 years old by human standards. But she had her father's eyes and her father's quiet courage. Sirana had watched her lead troops into impossible battles and emerge victorious through sheer refusal to accept defeat. The Hollow main force will emerge in approximately 2 hours, Elena reported. Studying the tactical display, our scouts confirm that this is their full strength. Everything they have is coming through that gate. How many ships? Conservative estimate puts it at over 10,000. Sirana nodded. The United Defense Force had approximately 4,000 ships. They were outnumbered more than 2 to 1. We have a plan, Elena continued. If we can destroy the Rim Gate's control mechanism, we can close the portal permanently. The Hollow on this side will be cut off from reinforcements, and we can defeat them through attrition. And what will it take to destroy the control mechanism? Elena was silent for a moment. Someone will have to fly a ship directly into the gate's core while it is active. The energy release will be catastrophic. There is no possibility of survival. A suicide mission. Sirana had known this day would come. From the moment she understood what the Rim Gate was and how it worked, she had known that closing it would require sacrifice. I will lead the strike team, Elena said, her voice steady. I have already selected volunteers from the human fleet. No. The word came out before Sirana could stop it. Elena looked at her with surprise. Supreme Commander, your father died saving my people, Sirana said. He stood between my ship and extinction when he had no reason to. When he owed us nothing, when we had treated him with contempt. I have spent the last 6 months learning what that sacrifice meant. I have spent 6 months trying to understand the courage that drove him to give everything for strangers who had mocked him. She turned to face Elena directly. I understand now. Your father taught my people how to stand. It is time I showed yours that we learned the lesson. Commander, you cannot. You are the supreme commander of the United Defense Force. The fleet needs you. The fleet needs to win, Serana corrected. And they will. But they also need to see that the Valkyrie are not just taking from this alliance. They need to see that we are willing to give as much as we have received. She placed one of her forehands on Elena's shoulder. The same gesture of dismissal she had used when she first met Marcus Cole, but this time, it was a gesture of respect. Your father asked me a question once. Right before he died, he asked me to make his sacrifice worth something. I have been trying to answer that question ever since today. I finally can. The battle began when the rim gate flared to life and hollow ships began pouring through. It was the largest single engagement in galactic history. And it was as brutal as everyone had feared. Ships died by the hundreds. On both sides, the void between stars was lit by the constant flash of weapons fire and explosions. Serana watched from the bridge of her strike vessel as the main fleet engaged the enemy. She saw Valkyrie cruisers fighting with the same desperate courage that humans had shown at Kethra. She saw Rasheen ships sacrificing themselves to protect human carriers. She saw species that had never known war throwing themselves into combat with a ferocity that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Humans had taught them all something that no amount of strength or technology could provide. They had taught them that courage was contagious, that standing together meant something, that some things were worth dying for. Strike team, begin approach, Serana commanded. Her small fleet of 12 ships accelerated toward the rim gate. Weaving through the chaos of the battle, hollow interceptors tried to stop them. But the main fleet provided cover, sacrificing ships to keep the strike team's path clear, one by one. The strike team's vessels were destroyed by the time they reached the gate's outer perimeter. Only Serana's ship remained. She flew alone toward the swirling vortex of energy that connected this galaxy to whatever void the hollow called home. Through the gate, she could see more of them coming. An endless tide of black ships waiting to pour through and consume everything she had sworn to protect. Supreme Commander, Elena's voice came through the communication system. We are tracking your approach, Godspeed, Serana smiled. An expression she had learned from humans, Commander Cole. Thank you for everything your people have done, for everything your father taught us. Tell the galaxy that the Valkyrie stood when it mattered. I will. I promise. The rim gate loomed before her, vast and terrible. A wound in the fabric of space itself. Serana thought about her brother, who had died trying to protect their people. She thought about Marcus Cole, who had died protecting a species that had treated him with contempt. She thought about all the beings who had sacrificed everything so that others might live, and she understood. Finally, what it meant to be truly strong. Strength was not armor or claws or the ability to crush your enemies. Strength was choosing to stand when running was easier. Strength was sacrificing yourself so that others might survive. Strength was refusing to quit even when victory was impossible. She had learned that lesson from the weakest species in the galaxy, and now she would prove that she had learned it well. Her ship struck the rim gate's control mechanism at full speed for a single instant. Energy beyond measure flooded through her vessel. In that instant, Serana felt no fear. She felt only pride. Then the gate collapsed, and a cascade of destruction tore through the hollow fleet, cut off from reinforcements. The remaining enemy ships were quickly overwhelmed by the United Defense Force. The battle was won. The war was over 1 year later. A memorial was built at the center of Vareth Prime. It was a simple structure, a single pillar of white stone, surrounded by gardens that bloomed with flowers from 100 different worlds. Representatives from every coalition species gathered for the dedication ceremony at the base of the pillar. An inscription had been carved in every language known to galactic civilization. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything that had been sacrificed. They were small. They were soft. They were afraid. They stood anyway. Here we learned what strength truly means. Elena Cole stood before the memorial and placed her hand against the cold stone. She thought about her father, who had died in a tiny frigate trying to buy time for people who had mocked him. She thought about Sarada, who had flown alone into the heart of destruction to close a gate that threatened all life. She thought about all the beings from all the species who had given everything so that others might have a future. A Volcari honor guard approached and placed a war token at the base of the memorial. It was the highest honor their species could bestow, and it had never before been given to any non-Volcari, the guard commander. A young warrior named Kethran II, named for Serana's brother, spoke the traditional words, for courage in the face of extinction, for sacrifice beyond measure, for teaching us what it means to stand. We honor them. Elena wiped tears from her eyes and stepped back around her. Beings from every corner of the galaxy stood in silent respect. They had come together as strangers. They had been forged into allies by fire and sacrifice, and they had learned, all of them, the lesson that one small human had tried to teach in an assembly. All long ago, strength was not about size or power or the ability to destroy your enemy's strength was about choosing to protect those who needed protecting, even when it cost everything. Strength was about standing between the innocent and extinction. Strength was about being human, whatever species you happen to be. As the sun set over Varith Prime, casting long shadows across the memorial garden, Elena whispered a final message to the father she would never see again. You surprised them, Dad, just like you said you would. And somewhere, beyond the stars, she hoped he could hear her at the end.